Welcome, everybody, to a brand new episode of IBC's Evil Safety Dudes, where we talk about all things occupational health, safety, and security, and every now and again, environmental. We got a super special podcast for us today. I got an awesome guest. We're launching into some of our security topics now, and I have with us today in the IBC podcast for it, Mr. Mark Millard. How you doing this morning?
Doing great.
Cool, man. And Mark's a cool guy, guys. He is a defensive tactics instructor. He is a correctional officer, and he's here today so I could pick his brain on all things kind of security and defensive tactics training, and comparing that with, the self-defense that us civilians get and stuff like that. So welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, great to be here, and appreciate the invite.
Yeah, man.
Love the topics.
Yeah. So, we like to talk about a lot of OSHA stuff, and, people are always thinking about the plant worker, the construction worker,
right?
When you hear OSHA. But OSHA is like everything occupational. So the guy in the jail, the guy in the prison, that's an employee.
Right. Right.
And, they get neglected, I think, sometimes, who I think OSHA never even looks at is, I've always wanted this like athletes, like football players.
Yes.
They're paid and they get injured,
Constantly getting injured.
Yeah, it's like I've
Always
never heard
recovery.
of the Dallas Cowboys getting fined or anything. But.
Yeah.
Not by
Workplace
OSHA.
safety issues. Dangerous environment.
So, everybody thinks construction, and it is, it's definitely a high-risk job. And manufacturing with all the machines is high risk. But, what are some risks associated with being a correctional officer? What are some injuries that could happen?
Well, you can have physical injuries, obviously, from having to restrain combative individuals. But you also have the potential of airborne pathogens.
Okay.
Things people don't think of.
Close quarters, right?
You're close quarters. You're in a contained environment. So definitely learned a lot about, and you will learn about that stuff anyways. But then through COVID,
right?
Obviously there's those issues.
I was
hepatitis and all the
your
fun
bloodborne
stuff.
pathogens.
Bloodborne pathogens.
Yeah.
Airborne. Yeah.
And the fecal oral, like the Hep A.
Yes.
I'm sure. I worked locked psych wards for 10 years, and I had a lot of poop and pee thrown at me.
Yes.
And I imagine in the jails that might be something that
Yes.
happens from time to time.
Yes. Yeah.
So you got your bloodborne, your fecal oral borne, your airborne, and your ergonomic, your strains and sprains, and coming from a nursing background, we always learned patient handling, safe patient handling.
Right.
And later, when I got into the OSHA side, they were telling us that healthcare workers get hurt worse than construction workers and manufacturers workers put together. And at first, I'm like, how does that make sense? But when you're moving bodies around, it's really hard on you.
Right.
And so I imagine there's some kind of carryover to corrections because, I had to do several transports in my day to the seclusion room and different things like that when someone became a danger to themselves and others. But you're moving combative individuals who don't want to be moved.
Right.
And that in itself sounds pretty hazardous.
Verbal judo can be a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
But sometimes it doesn't always work.
No,
so,
there's a time and place for everything. There's a time for every tool. And when someone's swinging a chair at you, it's not time to talk.
No.
It's time to duck.
Yeah. You got to react quickly.
One time I got on the unit, and we got this little kid in, and I was getting a report. And they said, all right, Aaron, you got this guy today. They said he has violent Tourette's. And I was like, all right. They're like, yeah, don't sit next to him. I'm like, whatever. And they're like, yeah, he's going to pop you in the face. I'm like, whatever. I'm a martial artist, right? So I'm like, whatever. This kid's going to pop me in the face.
Yeah.
Whatever. So I went and sat right by him. Hi, how's it going? My name's Aaron. I'm a nurse today. And he was acting all cool. And then out of nowhere, bah, he just blasted me in the face.
Of course.
And I felt pretty dumb, like. They told me, and I thought I was cool. But I imagine there's probably a threat of attack on the officer too.
Yeah, not to get too political, but recently in Iowa, we've made cuts. Before
It's a podcast. You can say whatever you want. Okay.
Governor Branstad made heavy cuts to the mental health,
Ooh,
structure, and
did that?
lost the beds were lost all across the state, and unfortunately, there's the next place for those people to go is the street. Mistakes are made and decisions are made, and jail is the next step. Then for not all of them, but a majority of them, and go out. They're off their meds now, and so in you talking about the psychology background that you had, working in a psych ward and that. You and I would have some similar conversations, I'm sure, right now, because we're dealing with a lot more mental health issues in the correctional workplace, and you're talking about combative, subjects and stuff like that. Yeah, it's a real thing.
So I'm not looking for an official stat, just Mark's best guess. What do you think, like, percentage of inmates with mental health diagnosis or issues?
Well, I
20, 25?
Yeah. And
95?
I wouldn't stretch that high, but it could be over 50. And I tell you what, Aaron, having run in the meds, I'm no nurse, but
right.
I do distribute medication, and I know what a lot of these medications are for.
Well, yeah.
And so the majority of the people that are on meds do have some psychological medication that they're taking.
Do you guys get any medical briefs, or is that all like protected information? Like, it's like, I never work corrections, so I'm just making up stuff. Inmate 452, he has,
yes,
bipolar, manic depressive, schizophrenia.
Yes, and those questions are asked, during the booking process. We need to know medical.
Yeah.
And in order for for us to care for this individual while they're in our facility, we have to know their medical, their mental.
Well, I was just laughing because when you don't, it's a problem too. Because I remember patients.
Well, that's a lawsuit waiting to happen.
Well, lying too.
Yes.
They just tried to kill themselves or kill someone else, right? And so we're restraining them, and they're like making up some medical issue. Oh, my blood sugar. It's like, it's like, you don't have diabetes. Yep. But if you weren't briefed on any of that,
well, then it's a guessing game, and that can come in the heat of the moment.
Yeah.
You never told me you were epileptic and you had seizures, and here we are.
Right. So in the defensive tactics world, I think it's a higher level of martial arts. And I say that because, you got, like, in my mind, you got like three different things. You got martial arts, you got self-defense, you got defensive tactics, and they're all similar but different. They're all like part of the same family.
You're absolutely right, Aaron.
If I were to learn like Taekwondo, I might be learning how to compete and win. If I learn self-defense, I might learn how to survive an attack at all costs. And then if I learn defensive tactics, I may be learning similar moves, but I'm learning all these when you can, when you can't, all these other force continuums. So I think they all play together. But, when I got pulled over to the criminal psych unit, we'd get, this was in Yankton where I worked,
Okay.
And so I worked a few different facilities, but the criminal psych one, like the jail psych one, was in Yankton. And every year at Sturgis, we get a bunch of bikers in there.
Sure.
What'd this guy do? Oh, he bit a cop's ear off.
Wow.
And a lot of times, to avoid criminal stuff, they would play crazy. And sometimes they were a little bit, but they would.
Yes.
Because then that helps them criminally.
Yes.
And so now we have to deal with them, like a bunch of nurses and mental health techs.
Yep.
But it's not corrections. My understanding, I had some buddies that work corrections, and they got to do a lot more than we got to do as nurses and techs, And
you're right.
I've had really good friends who I worked with who were mental health techs lose their jobs because they did a wrestling move or a jiu-jitsu move. It wasn't in the sanctioned moves,
Yeah.
And they were actually just, trying to keep that individual safe, keep themselves safe. But to me, I always thought, man, this is asking a lot of people. To defend themselves without causing any marks, without causing any harm. When this person's a 350-pound biker coming at you, I'm supposed to somehow defend myself without hurting him, I'm like, man, I don't even know Bruce Lee could do that.
Yeah. And it sounds like a scripted movie.
Yeah.
You just didn't get a script.
Yeah.
You know, and it makes it dangerous, and it makes your reaction time that much slower because you're trying to decide on what technique instead of just being able to react.
Yeah, if I could just use Krav Maga and somebody comes at me, I'm just gonna front instep kick him to the groin, try to snap his pubic symphysis, and if he got a hold of me and he was trying to crush my trachea with his big 350-pound paw hand, you know, I might have to crush his or pop his eye out and then survive. But then my boss would be like, "You're fired."
Yeah, and you're going to court.
Yeah, and you're losing your license.
Yes.
You know, so let's talk about your world in corrections, because I train a lot of police officers, and I train a lot of use of force and force continuums. But in the correction world, is there like a force continuum type thing?
It's the same you'd find in law enforcement.
Okay.
The same you'd find in law enforcement. And what makes you a defensive tactics instructor also makes you a use of force instructor.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
So, yes, and you and I have chatted, or we're chatting earlier about self-defense compared to defensive tactics. Your basics are the same.
Right.
It's just your decision-making process has to be different.
So, like
self-defense, you can, not to interrupt you, sorry, Aaron.
Yeah, you're all good.
Self-defense, you could turn around and run away. Defensive tactics, you now have to
you're
control.
You're the guy.
Yeah.
You have to
control. Yep, exactly.
Yeah. I was trying to think of these fancy words, like disproportionate force, and like there's all these things thrown at cops and corrections. You know, if someone comes at you with an open hand to slap you and you shoot them, you're in big trouble.
Yeah,
you know, because that was disproportionate force.
Yes.
In corrections, they shouldn't have guns.
Nope.
But they could make. I watched a lot of movies, so I'm assuming they're making knives out of toothbrushes and stuff.
Yep. You know, and
shivs out of tinfoil. And
we've recently changed over to a little longer toothbrush, and I wasn't too fond of that.
Yeah.
But it is what it is, you know. And
you're looking at it from a different perspective.
Yeah. Went from a 2-inch toothbrush to a 4-inch. This just doubled in size.
The first time I had to disarm somebody with a knife was as a nurse, and a kid had made a shiv off the cover of the fake wood dresser. You know, it looks like wood. You know, it's really probably just particle board, but the top looks like wood. He was able to peel that off and break it and make it into like a
shiv.
Yeah, and but he wasn't clever enough not to let us see the whole thing happening. And so they, you know, he had it, and they said, "Aaron, go get it." You know, it's like, you go get it. You know that.
Or can you help me at least?
It's like, call a code, man. Call a code.
Yeah.
And sometimes we call codes and nobody comes. You know, code green in the hospital. You know.
Yeah.
Violent patient like that. So it was me and a tech, and so back then I didn't have Krav training. You know. I had martial art training, you know, I had MMA training, you know.
Right.
But we don't deal with knives in MMA.
No. Maybe a salty referee every once in a while.
Yeah. So I grabbed a sheet from the linen closet, and I wrapped it around my left hand. I figured if he strikes, I'm going to block with this, and then I'm going to grab him. You know, I'm just winging it. You know,
right?
That I didn't get that in nursing school.
You missed that day, Aaron.
I precepted in psych, you know, and I could have been sleeping on my desk. It's true, but I probably wouldn't have if they're like, today we're nursing students. We're going to teach you how to disarm a violent patient with a knife. I'd been like, finally something I'm really into.
This I can listen to.
So, so I go in there, and sure enough, he swings it at me, and I was able to block it, and he wasn't a big kid. This was adolescent psych, so it's not that cool of a story. But it got scary for me.
Doesn't make that blade any less, or the shiv any less dangerous.
I picked him up, and I put him on his bed, and I heard a pop. And I was like, oh, man, I just lost my license. I just broke this kid's arm. I was just like, oh, man. Turned out it was the knife breaking.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, thank God, man. But so then we restrained him, you know. But, you know, it's like, I don't think people realize what, you know, different people do for a living and how hard it is. And they're so quick to criticize, you know, like, oh, you shouldn't have done that. You know, like,
Monday morning quarterback.
Yeah, and it happens in law enforcement with cops, with panic-induced shootings. And
isn't hindsight wonderful?
And everybody's quick to judge, but it's tough. And sometimes we sacrifice ourselves. We'll take an injury, we'll take a blow in order not to hurt him so much. Or, in MMA, man, we would pick them up and we would land on them.
Yeah.
We put our full weight on them, but sometimes in different settings in defensive tactics, we're actually could take them down to hurt them, but we would modify that a little bit.
Yes.
And that's a high level of martial arts to me.
Yes. There's your wrestling, judo, and jiu-jitsu involved in that aspect right there.
Yeah. The takedowns they gave us to do were always lame, too.
Yeah. You got some takedowns? I have to dig into my own repertoire and be like, well, this is what I would add here. You know?
Well, they were always multi-person ones. Like,
yes, yeah.
You got a person on each side, and you're escorting, and they become violent, and you got to put them down. And so it was always 2-on-1, but it was always funny to me because I'm like, all right, can we try this with just a little bit of resistance? I'm going to be the patient. You guys try to do this on me. And I'm like, well, I'm out,
Yeah.
And I just bit you. And I just kicked you in the head.
Yeah.
And then just headbutted you.
Oh, my gosh, reality.
Some of those defensive tactics programs, were like developed by traditional martial artists, when you look at the history of them. And it's like, did you spend a day in your life doing this in reality? That all looked good on paper, but it doesn't always work in the real world. So let's talk about your defensive tactics. You're teaching at Job and Corrections. You're teaching police academy students. Who do you get to teach?
I do teach at my county, defensive tactics. I'm certified here in the state of Iowa. And
awesome.
I do teach at Western Iowa Tech.
That's really cool.
Defensive tactics for the police science program.
Nice.
Yeah, so
you got like mats and stuff?
Yes, yeah.
Cool.
Yes. And I'm admittedly I am heavier on the grappling side because you can't punch handcuffs onto people. But
you could punch them with handcuffs.
Yes.
If it's allowed and you force continuum.
Yes.
They make good brass knuckles.
Nonetheless, you are going to get some striking training. You need to have that, that element, understand that element, but you have to know how to close that distance, get into a control position, be it against a wall or on the ground. And that's where I always tell officers, your radio is now your best friend, because if you have a control position, you don't feel like you have to get the gold medal, and the gold medal being the handcuffs on without help.
Okay. I could see that. Some people want to
just rush to the hands, understand what they're doing, know where they're at, call for them. But if you got somebody that's too strong, but you're in a good position, maybe you got them say belly down,
right?
But their arms are tucked. Well, you're still in a good control position. And one of the things we learned from like Krav Maga is we got to scan this area.
Oh yeah,
we got to see,
somebody come to their aid and boot you in the face.
Exactly. So you make sure your area is clear. Understand that his hands are underneath there, and you don't know what they're going to come out with. But that being said, that's where the radio comes in.
Right.
Once you gain that control, then you can call in the backup if they're not already there to help.
I know in MMA training, it seems to me one of the biggest injury producers is takedowns. It just seems, in my experience, someone gets, kicked in the groin every now and then and stuff like that and poked in the eye.
Yeah.
But, when I see someone like writhing in pain, like it's a bad takedown attempt, didn't roll right, didn't twist right. But that's on mats too, when you guys have to control someone that's a danger to themselves or others, you're doing it on concrete.
Yes, yeah.
That's real world stuff.
That doesn't feel good.
And that might change how you do things, MMA, self-defense versus defensive tactics.
Yes.
You're doing stuff on concrete.
Well, and then you add on top of that, like we talked about, maybe some form of psychosis, or drug use or both. If they're coming in hot off the street and, they've been on a bender for a little bit, now you have somebody who's not really going to feel those first beginning pain compliance techniques you might try.
Did you hear the story of, Anthony Lionheart Smith in Omaha got his house
Yes.
broken into.
Yes, I did.
That was like a good case study. I'd actually like to get him to come and do a talk on it.
I'd love to pick his brain on that. And
'cause
he's so honest and true about it. That's what I think is.
if we were in the cage, he would eat me alive.
Mm-hmm.
But he wasn't. He was at his home.
Yeah.
And some dude, either really psychotic or really hopped up on meth or
Mm-hmm.
PCP. I looked it up on the internet, and I saw this guy, and I saw he was caught on different security cameras.
Yeah.
He was trying to go into several different houses. And I could tell, working in that world for 10 years, I'm like,
Yeah.
if I had to put money on it,
Yeah.
Psychotic or PCP.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know which one it is yet. I'd have to hang out with him, but just from that little
Yep.
5-second security snippet. But he got into the house, and Anthony was like, he was able to take him down and just dropping elbows on his face.
And you know how dangerous he is.
In elbows.
He is a high-level competitor, high-level fighter.
He's the man, and elbow strikes are the man.
Yeah, yes.
If you got me on the ground and started dropping elbows on my head, that's going to take out like 99% of humans.
Yes.
But because of this guy's whatever, drug use or psychosis, Anthony was saying it was freaking him out because it had like no effect on him.
Yes.
And people don't realize about these worlds too is just what you were saying. You could have someone fresh and they're still at the peak of that PCP or that psychosis, that psychotic break, and it's like a superhuman. Or bath salts, man. Oh man,
my
I'm sure you've
gosh.
been getting some training on bath salts.
Yeah,
and
there's
the synthetic marijuana's gone bad. And
fentanyl.
yeah. And, people that aren't feeling pain that, you're doing stuff to them that works on everybody else, and then they smile at you, it's like, wow. And you're still under the same rules yourself. It's not like you could start dropping elbows on your head, so.
Yep. Try to control, just.
Yeah, that's a difference, too, between defensive tactics and MMA.
Yeah.
Self-defense, that could happen, because that was self-defense for him, actually. He went from the MMA world all of a sudden to self-defense world. Yeah.
Yep.
And, everybody on the internet's like, why don't you choke him out?
Yeah.
Why don't you break his arm?
It's easy for you to say.
Yeah.
It's difficult. And it's not that those techniques aren't, effective or, efficient to use.
Yeah.
It's a human against a human.
When you finally get him in control, you're kind of going to do what's there in front of you.
Yes. Yeah.
You have to actually put yourself at risk to go into a different position for a choke or something.
Yes, exactly. In a home with your loved ones.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And I think in that aspect too, though, chokes would be pretty good. Unfortunately, we can't do them in the defensive tactic world. I mean, I guess if they were trying to kill you,
yes.
If it was at that level, lethal force, you could meet with lethal force.
Exactly. And that's the continuum that we spoke of.
Yeah.
If they're going for your weapon, your sidearm or something like that. Now you've met that level of use
So I
of
guess
force.
it's there for you, but a lot of departments that I work with, like some of the defensive tactics programs that I use, they do have chokes in the curriculum. They call them vascular neck restraints.
Yes, yep.
And
that is the proper terminology for it.
And I always ask when I have a department want some defensive tactics training. I'm like, all right, what can I teach you? What can I teach you?
Mm-hmm.
They're like, I don't know. Let me talk to my boss. So then I get somebody's boss, and he's like, I don't know. Let me get the policy out. And then they get the policy out, and they go, no vascular neck restraint. I was like, oh man,
Hey,
they're effective on everybody.
I'm of the school of thought that you're gonna. Yes, it's possible you're gonna have that 1% chance that you go too far with it, but that's why you train. That's why you do the training.
Well, for sure.
I believe you should be able to use it just to end the conflict.
It's a very potent tool.
Yeah.
And if your intermediate weapons, because you guys, do you get to carry guns on duty?
For transports, yes.
Okay.
Yes. So.
But in regular like jail or prison?
No, taser.
Yeah. So like,
I'm a taser
if somebody
instructor
has
as
a shiv, let's say your taser was inaccessible or knocked out of your hand, and now a guy's got a knife on you, and you're like, and the choke was there, but you're like, now you're faced with this, like, okay, I could survive and actually not cause any permanent damage.
Yeah.
Chokes are kind of cool.
Yes.
You put someone out.
I've
been choked out
so
in a
have I.
jiu-jitsu tournament. And I woke up like the most peaceful, restful sleep.
Recovered.
And it was like kind of nice. And like, it was like a reboot, right?
Yeah.
And that I woke up and I'm seeing the ref and the promoter, and they're kind of freaking out. And I'm like, where am I? And then I realized where I was, and I'm like, oh, man, I just lost. But I was fine. I actually competed again like 15 minutes later.
Because you can recover. It's not like blunt trauma.
You know, but yet.
That kind of a knockout.
It's demonized,
it is.
That move. And, you know.
Well, and if you train, not to get too martial art crazy, but I've been blessed to have some gi training.
Right.
And I like bringing, defensive tactics wise, I have dreams of bringing people in with hoodies and be like, we're going to test run a lot of these gi chokes that I know,
Well, I'll jack this time of year.
Absolutely.
Everybody's got a jacket on.
Yep.
I do it for fun too.
Yeah.
To like people in my life.
Flannels, hoodies.
To my teenage son.
Yes.
If we're like walking outside, I'll like get behind him and just try to gi choke him with his coat just for practice.
Sure.
We're a martial art family, it's just how it rolls.
To be expected, right?
But it works. It has a definite use. Now summertime.
Yeah.
It's probably not happening.
No.
Unless, a guy's got a flimsy tank top you can rip and
Yeah. I've seen ways to wad up a shirt, but I'm like, in the heat of the moment, I don't know if I'm going to be.
Yeah. Some of that's high level stuff with punches.
It
and
is.
all that.
Yeah.
One of the things that bothers me personally about law enforcement training in general is the lack thereof, really. Like, so you get in the academy and then what, you have to go through a recert annually every 2 years.
I believe. Well, in Iowa here, ours is every 3
for instructor or for users.
Instructor.
Yeah,
instructor for.
Well, I have one that's a 4-year for instructor.
Okay,
I'm about to do it next week.
Okay.
Yeah, but maybe it is 3. I can't remember. But it's a long time.
It's a decent amount of time. I'd have to look at my certificate.
But for
and see what that says.
the officers.
That's annual.
So, and what is you 8 hours?
Yeah. But we break that up throughout the year because
that's better.
I just want them to have at least some spread out training.
Yeah.
And that's where, how you and I train.
Right.
And sometimes I don't feel that's enough.
No, for sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now we're, we get to that point where we're training officers and it's, the bar is set too low, in my opinion. As an instructor, I'd love to have this weekly with these guys.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
But, then you have the officer interest and stuff like that.
And budgets.
Budgets.
That's the big killer.
It is.
That's the excuse I've always
Everyone's
got.
getting paid overtime doing this,
Yeah.
And if you're from a small county or police
I've talked
force.
to the chief of police of a major city, and I was bringing this very thing up with them, and they're like, all right, figure out how to pay for it, and we'll do it, Because like you said, you can't take them off duty. And then, so it's overtime, and then paying overtime, like that's an increased deal. But on my side, as a trainer side, we know how hard. Have you ever seen someone let's go to MMA for a second.
Okay.
Have you ever seen someone just clean on them tie pads, man? Just clean in practice. Just like, you're like, man,
wow, so crisp.
This is beautiful technique.
Yes.
And then they get in the cage or the ring, and they look like a street fighter.
Yeah.
Slop City.
It just all goes south.
Yeah, they looked good with their amount of training they had under very limited pressure.
Yes.
But when it hit the fan, when they're in condition red, when their heart's beating 175 beats per minute, it all went out. They didn't actually have the reps to make it a neuron pathway to be able to perform it under stress.
Yes.
So we know
Tunnel vision.
Yeah. Auditory exclusion, all those issues that are going, brain lateralization with that whole condition red, condition black. We know that as trainers. It's the same thing in real life when an actual violent attack happens.
Yeah.
They say you go to the basement brain, And if that's not like pre-wired in you from tens of thousands of reps, it's really hard to pull off and execute under the heat. But yet when you're only training once a year at it, Like, it's a tall order,
Right.
you know, and then the whole world wants to complain about, like law enforcement,
Yes.
how they're reacting. It's like,
When
there is a fix here.
Yeah, there is. And when budget is the issue, then they want to defund that budget that's wilting away anyways.
Right.
Well, that's not the answer. If you're looking for safer approaches to combative individuals, better decisions before you go to your sidearm.
Right.
That takes a lot of training.
I've been accused, Aaron, you just want to turn all the cops into MMA fighters.
No, it's not it.
No, man, I don't want to turn you into MMA. You wouldn't even make a good MMA fighter.
Yeah.
I just want you to be able to survive on the street. I want you to be able to handle this attack without going lethal.
Yes.
It's really a humanitarian thing.
It is, very much so.
When I first learned about panicked-induced shootings, that made so much sense. Why did that officer pull his gun? Well, did you see that guy?
Mm-hmm.
That guy was huge, and he was barreling at him. And this little skinny guy gets 8 hours of training a year in fighting.
Yeah, yeah.
What is he going to do? He's not competent. He's not confident in his mind. Like, all right, I'm going to shuck this guy, sprawl, take his back, and then I'm going to do this so he can't get up,
Yep, I know how to distribute my weight
Yeah,
evenly.
I mean, he's not good at wrestling.
Yeah. Yes.
He didn't even wrestle in school. And then so of course there's that sidearm, which is a very effective tool, and he's just thinking of self-preservation.
And he may have more training on that sidearm than he does the actual defensive tactics, and that's unbalanced.
Yeah.
So he's going to go to his comfort level, and
For sure.
unfortunately that comfort level is that sidearm.
And they say when it goes down, you're gonna result to your highest level of training. They say it different ways, but whatever you've trained the most at, that's what you're gonna result to. And I found that out to be true my first kickboxing fight. I had only been in a Muay Thai gym for 3 months. My background was karate, so I've been training Muay Thai for 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
Coach says, "You're fighting," so he throws me in the cage. And guess what I did? Karate,
for sure.
I won, but still, that guy was throwing roundhouses. I didn't even know how to check him.
Yeah.
I just ate him. I didn't even know what to do. He may have showed me in that 3 months, but it's
not in your repertoire.
No,
yet.
man.
It's not a go-to technique.
I had front leg teeps, and straight punches. And that's what I did, and I beat the guy up. But I limped for a month.
Yeah.
Why didn't you check those kicks? I don't know. I didn't think of it.
And you said it right there.
Yeah.
I didn't think of
Yeah.
it. Well, there you go. We shouldn't be thinking. We should be reacting.
Yeah, it should have been
It just
natural.
wasn't. It shouldn't be a reaction. And
but that story plays well with what we're talking about. You get all this training on other things, and then it goes down, and you're going to default to what you're trained at the most, and that's that draw, that presentation,
Yep.
Center mass targeting,
Yep.
So, I mean, I
Yes,
think there are
sir.
solutions out there, but
There are, and it does require a more of a budget and more training.
right.
It's repetition. And we know this as trainers and coaches, and it's repetition.
So for any billionaires out there
Yes.
that are listening, and you're like, I'm tired of donating to the same old organizations year after year.
Mm-hmm.
Let's donate to a nonprofit defensive tactic that focuses on training police. It will actually reduce police shootings of unarmed individuals.
I couldn't agree with you.
100%.
100%.
But it's different. You got to think outside the box. You got to understand the logic. Training cops to be more competent in defensive tactics will reduce shootings.
Yes.
And when the whole nation's looking at this, how do we fix this? And even the issues with like George Floyd and stuff, that should have never happened. I mean,
Should have never happened.
And that dude, he ruined for a lot of us for being able to teach because he didn't use it right. Now, I don't know if training would have helped that guy not to do it.
Right.
It might have helped one of his partners speak
Yes.
up and be like, we got this, get off him.
Yeah. Well, and
He wouldn't listen to those bystanders, but maybe would have listened to a fellow officer.
as goes into training, that's verbalization. The ability to communicate to the other officers
Right.
what's going on, and the courage for another one of those officers to stand up and say, hey, man, lay off.
Yeah.
You know?
We step codes. Because when we were restraining someone, I would, I would be the guy that had to be first, and then they would come and help me, and then I'd have to leave to go get a doctor's order for a shot, draw it up, some Ativan and Haldol. That's what we used to use back in the day,
yes.
And then I'd have to come and get back in there, and this guy's still wrestling. We'd have to wrestle a guy while I'm trying to give him a shot. That's high-level martial arts.
That is.
You got a needle.
Needle with the dangerous,
But we'd have to communicate, because if I was just like, all right, I'm getting up now and leaving, they, because that's how we did it at first. They're not thinking about it. And then they know, oh, okay, this guy who's maybe controlling my upper body is about to get off. That's when I'm going to explode.
Yes.
And so now we got to re-control them, and now there's injuries, to everybody, and it's just not safe. So we would start doing codes so they wouldn't know what I'm about to do.
Yep.
I would just say med, and they know, all right, Aaron's getting up to go get an order and go drop some meds. And so then they were ready to fill in my gap.
Nice.
But it's that communication,
yes.
And that actually didn't come from our training. That just came from us working together and experience. But I actually was the trainer, so I would always debrief after incidents, say, hey, man, when I got up and that guy then got up, let's do it this way. So, I mean, training is a big part of it, but that communication is a big part of it. And,
we always work on our exit in a situation like that, if there's 3 or 4 of us officers, say we had one come in hot and heavy off the street, maybe he's intoxicated, maybe psychosis thing or whatever, and things just go south in the search room, right? Got him in there, patting him down, getting ready to go in and book and process. He or she doesn't want to go, and bang, the fight's on. What you do is, okay, we get him where he needs to go, make sure he's clear of, his pockets are clear, everything's good, taking off all the accessories and stuff like that, and then we exit one at a time, and we back out the door while still facing. And that's one thing that me and my partner have added on to our training methods is, tight quarters, handcuffing, unhandcuffing, exit or enter and exit strategies.
Right.
Communication, which you just were alluding to too right there. It's just the communication between officers is paramount, because if you're not all on the same page,
yes,
and you're all getting up at the same time, the fight's going to be right back on.
Yeah.
The verbal commands the whole time, making sure you're heard and the subject is understanding, what's going on. Get out and then shut the door. Padded cell. They can spin in circles, hit the walls, do whatever. They call me every name in the book, but he's safe. We're safe.
Yeah.
We'll take care of the booking when he calms down.
It's just so much that corrections and law enforcement are dealing with. The training, I think needs to be there and increased, and the appreciation, everybody gets over it when their team loses, when their quarterback makes a bad play. But, we want to hold on to anger towards, law enforcement forever. And it's a tough job. And I understand law enforcement communities are taking major losses all over the country, then with mandatory vaccines and different things like that. And, it's tough out there. It's tough. It's a tough time to get into it. Anybody out there, what would you tell someone that's thinking about getting into corrections or law enforcement this time?
I go with the approach that if you're a community-driven individual, then law enforcement's a good job, for somebody who's driven towards community safety. I think in any community is the utmost, and what an honorable profession to get into.
Right.
It's still there. It's and not just to do it, and I'm not speaking in terms of, I'm going to pat myself on the back because I'm doing a public service. It's not because of that. You are literally out there making sure your community is safe.
Right.
I can't think of anything more honorable and more,
for sure. Because some of those super bad guys with no conscience, they're hurting,
Yes.
our sons, our daughters, our wives,
yes,
our moms,
yes,
But also on the other end of the compassionate side too is like some of those inmates or people that are just coming in, they're our sons, they're our daughters,
yes.
and to have the proficiency and competency in your defensive tactics to handle their attacks without hurting them. That's important too. And to me, like I said, that's a higher level of martial arts. That's a higher level of compassion.
Yes, it is.
You know,
and guess what? This individual, based on their charges, some of them, if they come in with some medium to hefty charges, now they're going to be in your facility for a while.
right?
So it isn't just, oh, I won today. No,
Right.
it's not even a win-loss thing. It's like, we're safe, they're safe, and that's what we're looking. That's what
Right.
we're looking for.
Yeah,
You know, the good guys versus bad guys thing. Yeah, that's a real thing. But you know, there's this individual's now going to be in my care and custody.
right.
You know, for X amount of months. You know, on down the road. So you have to have rapport with this individual. You know, and that comes with attitude, treatment, compassion,
Right.
a level of understanding for people.
One of the
Certain
other areas
situations.
I want to talk about with corrections, and I don't know how much training is dealt with on this, but I had a buddy. He was a mental health tech with me. We worked in the lock psych wards together for a year. He was also a good jiu-jitsu player.
Okay.
Yeah, he was a cool dude. And he was one that got fired because he did a sweet double leg on a patient.
Okay.
Didn't hurt him. This guy worked out all the time, so he was muscular. But this guy, the patient was a threat to himself and other. So my friend scooped him up. He had to. I mean, it was like the heat of the moment. And he didn't slam him. I mean, I was there. He
Brought him down with control.
Yeah, 100% compassion and control.
Yeah.
But somebody else saw that, you know. And so they, you didn't use one of our sanctioned moves, you know. And so he was gone, right? So he went to
That's too bad. That's somebody who's probably good at his job.
He was really good. He was really good with the kids and everything.
That's unfortunate.
The teenagers, you know. So he went to corrections, all right? And so we stayed friends. But one of the things I noticed is the longer he worked in corrections, like kind of the darker and the more depressed he got, the more kind of jaded,
I don't,
you know.
You know, that's true. You're around, and let me say this before I say anything else. Not everyone that comes into a facility is a mean, despot,
Right.
evil person.
Right.
And so I stay away from the judgment end of things because when you start casting your own morals on somebody, that's going to take you down the path that much quicker. And if you stay out of that realm,
right,
it's more of a job and then less of a, you know, I'm here, I'm the authoritarian. I don't play like that.
Whatever you're doing, it's working because you don't have that same dark, depressed, you know, vibe that I've seen other people get.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, there are, and I know exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
And you have to back away, and
you can get burnout in any job.
You absolutely.
But when you get burnout in that type of job, you know, it's kind of tough. It's a bad burnout.
Yeah, it can be difficult, and I've seen it happen to some people, and you know, they're good people. They're still good people. It's just you're around a lot of negative energy all the time.
I get to go through cool courses as my job, you know, training law enforcement.
Yeah.
So one course I went to really opened my eyes to this. It was just on surviving the job.
Right.
And it was all on psychology and mental health for corrections officers, for police officers, for, you know, the court workers, you know, bailiffs and the guys running the federal building. You know, there's a lot of different aspects of law enforcement. It was all on surviving the job. Like it was like preserving your marriage. There was a long hours on that. And I'm like, you know, I had to go get some continuing ed. So I signed up for the course. And I'm thinking, yeah, law enforcement tactics. We're going to learn, you know, some new shooting stuff. We're going to learn some new hand-to-hand and, you know, maybe a little verbal de-escalation. And then I get there and it's like, how not to get divorced.
Yeah, it's a real thing.
And I wasn't working corrections at the time, so, or law enforcement. So I'm thinking, okay, this is weird. But this guy, he had been a cop his whole life, you know, and he's gone through marriages. He's seen everybody around him lose marriages. So
Yeah.
he was talking about that. But then he would go into that jaded aspect and how not to carry the job home. And
It's difficult.
like, you're a cop at work, you're a corrections officer at work, but how not to be that at home. And just that started hitting me even as a non-officer, because like I just remember being a nurse and like, all right, I got 15 patients, I got 5 techs I'm working with, and some of you don't know this about nursing, but it all comes from military. And we run on military time. There's a lot of military organizational tactics used in the hospital. Like, you never think of that. And I was trained by all military nurses too. They were all military nurses. So like I'm running a tight ship, and
Right.
you don't have time for pleasantries and hi, how are you today? It's like, oh, you're here, quick. All right, go over there and do this.
Yeah, you never know what you're walking into.
Yeah. And when you have a second, you're filling it with your work, because in 2 seconds from now we might have something bad go down.
Yes.
So I'm running type ship.
And I don't know if trauma is the right word, but there is like some level of, okay, it's high anxiety, and then it comes down, and then and time after time after time, it can add up.
I'm lucky I'm married to a strong woman who's not afraid to check me, because I'd go home still on that.
Yes.
All right, this is what we gotta do. That we gotta do. And she's like, "You better come down a couple notches."
and that makes you a blessed man. And my wife is the same way. Because she reminds me who's in charge.
Because had you not get those checks, you start taking your work home with you.
Yeah.
And now your kids are inmates.
Yes.
And the home life's like a jail. And so this class was about that, and it opened my eyes, like there's way more to these jobs than what people realize.
Yeah.
And so do they deal with that in the academies or in service trainings, just like any psychology?
Yes,
or anything like
we
that?
do. In fact, I'm in mine right now. There's an annual jail school that is done, at least in the state of Iowa, and that topic is brought up. How to manage the job, the stress that comes with the job.
Nice.
Making sure that you aren't taking that job home, because the divorce rate among correctional officers is high.
Wow.
And it's addressed, and it needs to be. Stuff like that needs to be addressed.
Right.
That's your mental health.
Yeah. And
it's crucial. It's important.
When you're something that was weird to me when I first heard it, as nurses, we're caregivers, and in a big sense, you guys are caregivers. Well,
and not to interrupt you, Aaron, but there is a lot of similarities between the medical field and the law enforcement.
Right.
I'm sure there's a lot of believers in the full moon theory.
Yeah.
I know. I've
It's a full moon. Get ready, guys.
Yep. I've become a believer in it. So.
Well, that's where the word lunatic comes from.
Yes, from lunar.
Yeah.
Yes.
But when I heard of the caregiver golden rule as a nursing student, I didn't understand it at first. It didn't make sense to me until I thought about it long enough. But they were telling us, nursing students, if you want to be good at your job, if you want to be good at caring for others, then you have to prioritize your self-care. You have to care for yourself first and the most. And I was like, no, you don't be selfish to be a caregiver. Mm-hmm. You put the patient's needs in front of yours.
Yeah.
If you got to go to the bathroom, but they're in pain, they need a med, you're going to hold it and you're going to go give them that med. You know, la, 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 la.
Yeah.
What's this lady talking about?
Yeah.
But then you get a little experience, you get a little burnout, you come and work tired and you're short with the patient,
short-staffed.
Yeah, and then you're off your game because you're just worked 4 12-hour shifts in a row, and you start like not being the best person.
Yes.
And then you go, oh, I get it now. If I care for myself, make sure I'm sleeping and eating and hydrating and working out and still doing my passions and still getting my family time in. If I'm still caring for me as a human, when I come here, I could be a good human.
Mm-hmm.
I can be at my A game.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine
it's not
that's
easy,
the same.
is it?
No, it's not.
It's a hard schedule, because now it's like, well, I'm in order to make up for all this and do these things.
Right.
I'm cutting into my sleep.
Yeah, it's tough, but coming in at your A games, I realize is the best way to be good at the caring jobs, because when you're dead tired, man, it's it's hard.
Shift rotations.
Yeah,
Those
it's
are
hard to like speak to everybody kindly.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Or you didn't have time to bring lunch, and you're going to go without lunch on a 12-hour shift.
On a 12-hour shift.
And you're hangry now.
Yeah.
And then somebody's messing with you.
You ask anyone I work with, they know if I'm not eating, it's going to be a bad day. I'm an eater.
Yeah, that's another thing. People don't realize about medical and law enforcement is, night shift work.
Yes.
I worked nights on and off those 10 years.
Well, yeah.
I got to do days for a while, but evenings and nights. And I gained weight, man.
Yeah.
Because, to me, like 3, 4 in the morning, it's like I'm eating to stay awake.
Yeah.
I'm eating, and your metabolism's not running.
We call it the wall. You start hitting the wall.
Yeah.
That's where you're getting those tired eyes. Well, and all of a sudden that's when, we got 2 coming in now, 3 coming in.
Yeah.
And then you start getting busy too, but now it's like, I didn't eat yet.
Yeah. It's tough. And I think at nights, your metabolism's not on fire like it is during the day because, normal, you're sleeping at night, And so when you're eating all night, I think it's going more into fat instead of being burned properly. And so, it just throws your whole life upside down.
Yes, it does.
Working nights is tough.
It can be difficult.
Getting stuff done during business hours in your personal life, and then you got to quick go back to work and you're stressed. You didn't get to the bank on time. And, there's a lot that goes into it. And so, I think that, that mental health stuff is real for a lot of these trades. Real quick, we got about 9 minutes left, but let's talk about some of the other issues. You were mentioning bloodborne pathogens training. So, you guys get any? Do you have access to gloves? Do you ever get trained how to take a glove off that's full of blood?
Yes. We go through that training. We do have gloves.
Nice.
And like I said, our actual booking process, we're asking these questions,
Right.
AIDS, HIV.
Right.
And of course, we're not always dealing with the most honest people.
Yeah.
But at least we're asking the questions. But we always take those precautions as if they may, not overboard.
Right.
We're not coming in our big paper suits and all that stuff. That becomes a defensive tactics issue.
Yeah, for sure.
In my opinion.
I worked one job where they wouldn't tell you if a patient had AIDS. It wouldn't be in their chart. It was intentionally left out. So as a nurse, you wouldn't even know.
Oh.
But like
and you're drawing blood and
I was giving shots.
Yeah.
But like what you were saying earlier, we learned to know the AIDS meds because we still had to give the meds.
Yeah.
So if they're on these certain meds, there's 99% chance they have HIV or AIDS. But that's the only way we would know as their caretakers. So
I don't like that.
Yeah, but that just in itself, getting a little bit of education on pharmacology and what meds treat what, even if some of that data is held from you, or if it's withheld from you by them. But then you go to, are you on any meds? Yeah, I need my meds. And they start telling you the meds are on. You're like, oh.
Yep. Yeah. You may not be telling me, but you're telling me.
Yeah. It it's tough. So bloodborne pathogens. It's a big deal. Hep B is real, man. There's, I haven't looked at a stat in a minute, but the last statistic I look at is there was more healthcare workers with Hep B, getting Hep B at work, and there's more people in general with Hep B than HIV and AIDS, and that's a bloodborne pathogen, and needle sticks and stuff like that. But you guys are dealing with sharps, but you guys probably do you deal with blood from inmate to inmate violence? Yeah,
that'd be a thing. Seizure, you fall down with a seizure, crack your head open or something like that.
We used to deal with a lot of blood from self-harm too.
Yes, yep, that's a thing.
Yeah, so there's a lot of blood in these jobs, And then I said earlier about the urine and the feces being thrown.
Yes.
I can tell you some gross stories. I'm sure you can too.
I bet you're full of them. especially with the background in from a psych ward and that.
Yeah.
When you're just surrounded by it,
Right. One of the things that really messed with me, you were talking about trauma. I wasn't working that night, but there was a nurse night shift. So we had one nurse and 2 techs. and they had a whole, ward, a whole wing. This was adult psych, and the two techs were on the other end dealing with something, and the nurse was going in to do a check. They do every 15-minute checks or whatever, and she got raped.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and that, just hearing about that just cut me to the core. And it's like, that's one of the. I have 100 of those stories from growing up, in violence in Southern California, and what made me who I am and why I'm so passionate about teaching self-defense to people. But that one was a big part of it too. Like,
right.
It's like I don't want that to ever happen to anybody.
No, that's awful.
And if you had the defensive tactics, if you had the self-defense training, because this patient wasn't like a formidable force.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And there's a couple simple moves, some wrist grab breaks, there's some takedown defense, there's some combatives, that like
that could
have you just known them and trained them and had the mentality of I'm not going to be a victim, like what we train in self-defense all the time, like refuse to be a victim, like I'm not going down.
Yes.
I don't care if you punch me and knock me down. I'm not giving up. I'm going to kick and scream and claw, and I'm going to get up and I'm going to survive. I'm going to go home today, And so but I imagine in the correctional world, you may, as long as you've been doing it, there may have been a time where a friend got hurt, and could have been avoided.
Yeah. There's those instances, man. And I come back to staffing on a lot of that. Is making sure staffing is appropriate for your head count.
Right.
You're sending one person into a pod full of 25 people. That's and you have to make your presence known. And how good is your rapport?
Right.
It's sad to say, but sometimes you want to make sure that you've got okay people in there that, if you're getting jumped, some of the inmates might actually help you out.
No, we've had that. We've had patients come to the aid of staff before. I think it was awesome.
There's decent people out there that just make bad decisions.
It's a shame that had to happen, like you said. You should add staff. That's staff's job.
Yes.
But, with staffing shortages, that's been going on forever.
And right now, with our current economical situation in the United States, there's no applicants.
Yeah.
We are short applicants.
Right.
That's never been a thing.
Man. Yeah. So it might be getting worse. We got a lot of issues to overcome.
Yeah. It's an uphill battle.
Everybody needs to learn some Krav Maga.
Yes. I agree.
It might be, well, the other issue too, and we don't have time to get in this, but a lot of states and cities not, pursuing convictions on people that have certain breaking the law, so that like more criminals on the street, and some of that's we could debate about that all day long, if it's non-violent, if it's drug related, but still the fact that there may be less prosecution going on.
Yes.
That's a challenge too.
The whole smash and grab thing going on right now. My goodness.
Yeah, if it's under so many dollars, it's not even a crime.
Listen,
there's gateway drugs and gateway crimes.
Yes. Yeah. And if you are smart enough, there's smart criminals out there. A lot of these people are intelligent.
Right, for sure.
And you find out right there. Well, let's get 100 guys to go in and steal $800 worth of stuff.
Right. Yeah.
It's not hard to figure out.
Yeah.
And they'll get their slap on the wrist, and they're out that afternoon and out doing the same thing the next day.
Right. So from an insurance standpoint, they say the biggest work comp claims are slips, trips, and falls, and like ergonomic issue, sprains and strains, back tweaks. What do you think, just from your experience on, correctional officer injuries? Would you say that falls in line with that? Slips,
Sure.
trips, and falls?
Not necessarily slip, trips, and falls, but wearing a duty belt.
Okay.
And you got to understand how to set your duty belt up, number one, tactically.
Okay.
And number two, try to even out the weight distribution on your hips.
That makes sense.
And it's not easy to do. I don't always wear my sidearm like we talked about earlier. I can't wear my sidearm in the jail, but once I get out on transport, or if I'm doing court security or something like that, now I'm wearing my sidearm, and
it's heavy. It's a duty pistol.
Yeah,
it's not a little concealed carry.
No, it's gonna hang there. It may not appear that way, but on a 12-hour shift, for some of the officers out on the road,
that makes a lot of sense.
They're wearing a lot of that stuff, or their vest. They'll wear stuff on their vest there's tactical things I don't like about that, but
Right.
we can do a whole nother show on that. I cannot stand the taser on here.
Right. Yeah.
Drives me crazy because it's just right there. You know,
Yeah.
you got to make sure you're ready for that. Sorry, that's a
No,
tangent.
that's a great point though, because the belt or the vest has got to be set up tactically, and that's usually what is taught.
Yes.
But going on an injury,
Yeah.
you got to set it up ergonomically.
Exactly.
So you're not.
Because you'll hear guys, oh man, and I do it too.
Right. Yeah.
Man, my hips are sore.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a million reasons why I haven't. We've been martial artists, right?
Right.
We've abused our bodies,
Right.
And I've done
Just a little bit.
I've worked in packing houses. I've worked in factories. I've done a lot of lifting. I was a delivery man, so that's all played its role too.
Yeah. And sure, and that's probably helped you understand some of that too, the balance of that from those
proper
other experiences.
lifting, proper yes.
Well, Mark, believe it or not, it has been 1 hour.
Oh man.
Yeah, man, and I really enjoyed you, and we got to get you back
time.
because I think there's so much more we could talk about.
I'd love to come back and do this.
Officer safety and defensive tactics and stuff like that. And like I said, we're launching into a whole big security series because that's part of our platform and our format is safety, security, environmental, and health. And we've done a ton of safety, and we'll continue always to do the occupational safety side. And we were even doing that today because, officers are employees too.
Right.
That sounds like a slogan.
Yes.
All right, cool, man. Well, for Mr. Mark Millard, I'm Aaron Icino, and together today we were the evil safety and correctional officer security dudes. Until next time, everybody, stay safe.